Well, hello everyone. Jeffrey Daugherty, Christian Whistleblower, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the psychology of a formerly divine psychopath. It's a Christian whistleblower revelation. I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that it's something that will cause you to start pondering who and what you're worshiping. You can see down here below me my book, Final Message of the Last Apostle. I put that there because we will be referring to it during the balance of this broadcast. Now, let me start off by saying that I am not a psychiatrist. I am not qualified to diagnose anyone as a psychopath or anything else. I am, however, a fairly decent researcher, and I can take definitions and I can take stated examples of behavior as well as confessions and statements by the person in question, and we can at least draw some intelligent is a better word, inferences. And I want to talk about this entity that we call the Lord, Yahweh, Marduk, Jehovah, Rat Bastard. Well, you may not call him Rat Bastard, but I do. And I call him Rat Bastard for several reasons, mainly because he is one. But at any rate, let's go ahead and take a look at the psychology of the Lord, Yaldabaoth, Marduk, Jehovah, Yahweh, and see if we can make a case for saying that he is a formerly divine psychopath. You're saying to me, is this guy really sitting here saying that he believes that the person we worship as God is a psychopath? That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that the person you worship as God is a psychopath. And I'll stop playing with things now. I really hope that we can get some more support so we can get a really nice video editing program, kind of like old Scott Clark had there. If you didn't see the reaction video of Brother Jeff on Scott Clark of ERF Ministries, you want to take a look at that because it's a good one. And boy, I mean, they got some super slick, super nice, really great work on their videos. So you got to give credit where credit's due. That's for sure. But at any rate, we're going to take a look at this Lord, and we're going to see by his own actions, by his own confession, by his own words. Our own words tell us who we really are. So let's take a look, first of all, if we can, just at the whole idea of psychopathy. And what is psychopathy? How is it? What do you know? What are some type of behaviors that are common to psychopaths? Well, first of all, psychopathy is sometimes considered synonymous with sociopathy. I understand, though, that a real psychiatrists don't use the word sociopath anymore. It's kind of a discredited term. But it's a personality disorder, and it's characterized by persistent antisocial behavior. Now, again, that's one of them things we just run past, but let's get a real good idea of what these words mean so we don't inhibit our ability to comprehend later, because if you go past a word that you don't know the definition of, it reduces your ability to comprehend anything and everything you hear after that by up to 60%. So what do they mean when they say antisocial behavior? Well, antisocial behavior, age inappropriate, they are against norms for social conduct or social behavior. You know, they're things that, you know, it's kind of like pornography. The politicians say, well, we can't really define pornography, but we know it when we see it. And that's the way it kind of is by being antisocial. Impaired empathy. Now, how is empathy defined? Empathy is the capacity to feel what another person is experiencing from the other person's frame of reference. The capacity to place yourself in another's position. So a person that is a psychopath has no ability to put themselves in another person's shoes and really has no interest in putting themselves in another person's shoes. They just don't care. Now also with psychopathy, you get egotistical traits. Now what does egotistical traits mean? It's all about me. It reminds me of the old Toby Keith song, right? Want to talk about me, want to talk about want to talk about, all this stuff, me, because he had a girlfriend that all she wanted to talk about was her. So egotism is the drive to maintain and enhance favorable views of oneself. Generally features an inflated opinion of one's personal features and importance, and it often includes intellectual, physical, social, and other overestimations. How about that? Let's take another look at something here. I want to just take a gander at. What are some of the environmental causes, or what are some of the things that are thought to be environmental causes of psychopathy? Well, let's take a look at that because it's very, very interesting to me. Now, they did a study over in London, and they found out that one of the big precursors of psychopathy is that being physically neglected, low involvement of the father with the boy, coming from a disrupted family. Being physically neglected, low involvement of the father with the boy, and coming from a disrupted family. Do you remember the show we did just a couple days ago, coming out of the secret book of John and the Nag Hammadi scriptures, talking about the creation of the Lord? Let me refresh your memory just a moment. Okay, so what did we learn from the secret book of John that relates to the Lord and my assertions or my questions that his psychology may very well have been that of a psychopath? So let's take a look here. This is coming out again of the secret book of John. This is the section called A Crisis Became the World. And what happens here is that Wisdom, Sophia, the female wisdom, intended to create an image from herself, and she did it without the source of the spirit, the consent of the spirit, who did not approve. And without the invisible spirit's consent, she brought a being into being. So without a father, she brought this being into being. And she gave rise to a misshapen being. It was a being that she surrounded with a brilliant cloud. She put on a throne in the center part of the cloud. She cast him away from her. She sent him out. She cast him far from her. So he was by himself. She named him Yaldabaoth. He thinks he's a chief ruler, but he's obviously not, because he had a mother who was ruler over him and a father, arguably ruler over her. He assumes command. He assumes to create realms for himself. So if we go back to psychopathy, he was physically neglected because he was cast away from his own mother. There was low involvement of the father with the boy. In fact, there was no involvement of the father with the boy. And then he certainly came from a disrupted family. From the very moment of his birth, his family was disrupted. How about that? And another thing is that it talks about detrimental treatment by peers. Now, this is an actual truth in the Lord's case, but the Lord believes that he was treated detrimentally by his peers because the Elohim would not accept him as their chief ruler. And that goes back to the fact that I'm calling him a formerly divine psychopath, because the Lord was in the beginning divine. When they came, the Elohim, the inexpressible ones, to create this heaven and earth, he was a part of the divine council. He was working alongside them, so he was divine. He was working alongside the Word who became the Christ. And because, as we just read, he perceived that he was being mistreated by the rest of them because they wouldn't let him be the boss, he felt, and because of that, being rejected as a child, because of that no involvement with his father, because of that disrupted family, now he's being rejected again by his fellows. He responds with behavior that I believe defines him as a psychopath. He murdered millions in Egypt. He's murdered millions and it's not even that he does it himself. He tells people to do it, which is even worse, because those people have to bear that karmic guilt and that mental anguish of having killed a baby. Do you know what it would do to your psyche to kill a baby? Unless you're a psychopath. What it would do to your psyche to kill a little boy, a little girl, a woman, and hopefully even a man. But the Lord has commanded his people to do that over and over and over again. The Lord sending out people to murder other people is so replete within the Scriptures as to become cliche. The Lord has proven himself to be murderous. The Lord has proven himself to be a person that orders people to do murders. But what does the Lord say about himself? What does the Lord say about himself? What is his own confession of himself? Now, these are the words of the Lord. I'm not saying these things. I'm not putting these things in his mouth. These are coming out of the text of Final Message of the Last Apostle, and it is available for $1.99. But the Lord says, I am a jealous God. I am a consuming fire. Look how many times he says this, and these aren't all of them. I'm jealous. I'm jealous. I go forth and kill fools. I arouse up jealousy. So not only is he jealous, but he makes others feel jealous. He's jealous. He's avenging. He's wrathful. He takes vengeance. He reserves wrath for his enemies. Does that sound like a man with empathy? Does that sound like a being with any empathy? No. Does that sound like a being that is murderous? Yes. Does that sound like a being that thinks he's better than everybody else? How many times has he said, like, notice all these, the Lord your God, the Lord your God, the Lord your God, the Lord your God, the Lord your God. How many times has he said, I'm the only God? I am the only God. The Lord says that. I'm the only God. Think about the gods and the deities that you've heard about and read about throughout the totality of human history. There's a very select few, I can only think of one or two, and I do this for fun, that said they were the only God. The God of Zoroastrianism. Oh, well, what about the God of Judaism, and the God of Christianity, and the God of Islam? Well, they're all three the same person, and it's him. It's the Lord. So monotheism is a very minor cultural phenomenon. So it takes a psychopath, even a psychopathic divinity or deity, to think he's the only one. So the Lord says himself, I'm jealous, I'm wrathful, I'm consuming, I kill, I murder, I maim, I destroy. And I could go on, linking verses of this nature until the book's 500 pages long. As it ended up, it was only about 350. They're not the only characteristics of the good. These are not characteristics of the good gods of the Bible. The Lord is not the God of the Bible, and he is a fallen God of the Bible, because what happened was when he tried to get the Elohim to accept him as the leader of their council, they said no. He went on and destroyed the earth in a fit of impulsive rage and anger. Another characteristic of a psychopath, as we saw there on the article about psychopathy. So he was banished from the Elohim council. He's now banished from the councils of the inexpressible ones. He's banished from the highest. He's banished from the etheric realm, to make it short and understandable. He is formally divine, and even an amateur assessment of his psychology would certainly seem to qualify him as at least scoring very high on the psychopathy scale. He had very low involvement of his father. He was physically neglected, actually cast out by his mother. He came from a broken family. He was hidden in shame, but yet he was put on a throne, surrounded by a cloud, so he was pampered. He was spoiled. He was never told no. He was put on a throne, surrounded by a cloud. He was and is a bully. He was and is a liar and a deceiver. He was and is jealous and vengeful. And really, when you get right down to it, the Lord is the leader of the biggest gang in the history of the world. Is the Lord formally divine? Certainly. Is the Lord a psychopath? The evidence is surely there. Which brings us to the real question. I know that you're doing now what you are doing because it's what you've always been taught to do. And for as long as you've lived, and for 2,000 years as a species, we have been programmed into this ideology and mindset: worship the Lord, worship the Lord, worship the Lord. You don't even question it. Everybody knows that the Lord's God. Everybody knows that the Bible's real. Clue: whenever everybody knows something, it's time to investigate that, because it's most often the things that everybody knows are the things that everybody's been fooled by. Those things you can't question. Now, we can't question the Bible. Really? Why not? Oh, we can't question Christianity. Really? Why not? Do you want to worship a psychopath? Are you comfortable worshiping a psychopath? Are you comfortable taking your wife, your mom, your sister, your brother, your children, your father into churches ruled by psychopaths? And we hadn't even talked about Saul of Tarsus, a.k.a. false apostle Paul. He certainly fits the psychopathy of a psychopath as well. Christianity is a religion founded by a psychopath, spread to its greatest extent by a psychopath, whose doctrines were invented by a psychopath. The same one in those last two cases. What is there to be said about people that worship and follow and participate in a religion of a psychopath? Well, that's not for me to say. That's for you to decide. The psychology of a formerly divine psychopath. You've been led to the water. Are you going to drink? You've been led to some objective data. Are you going to think? This is all about helping you unwind your mind. This is all about helping you unindoctrinate yourself. And this is all about getting this psychopathic programming out of your mind so you can be excellent to you, so you can be excellent to me. And once we get rid of the psychopath, we can all be excellent to each other.